You're staring at a satellite screen in a darkened lab when a white sheet of Antarctica ripples with hidden texture. The radar returns sharpened, and beneath 3 kilometers of ice, a geometry appears that shouldn't exist. Straight lines where nature prefers chaos. The room goes quiet. Your colleague whispers,
I think that's man-made.
and for a heartbeat, everyone believes it. Hours later, the terminal reboots. The cache clears, and the file vanishes into a secure directory with a name no one recognizes. What if the world's last blank map isn't empty at all, but carefully managed, meticulously compartmentalized, and stitched together with just enough truth to keep the rest unbelievable? The idea sounds outrageous, and that's exactly why it lives rent-free in our imaginations. Antarctica is remote, inhospitable, and wrapped in rules that most people never read, which makes it the perfect canvas for secrets. Yet, the real continent is stranger than the legends. Mountain ranges completely entombed by ice, lakes that haven't seen sunlight in millions of years, and ancient landscapes preserved like a fly in amber. When people say they sealed the files, the bigger question is simpler and scarier. Tonight, we'll trace what's real, what's rumor, and where those two lines blur in the cold, icy plains of Antarctica. Start with a mountain range no human eyes had seen until the age of aircraft and radar. In the heart of East Antarctica, scientists mapped the, bear with me here, Gamburtsev subglacial mountains. I think I got that. An alpine landscape buried beneath 3 kilometers of ice, preserved by cold, slow-flowing glaciers that act like a glass paperweight on a delicate model. Their valleys look like river-cut terrain. Their relief shockingly sharp for features that predate much of the current ice sheet. The only way to see them is to fly above the white and listen with instruments that turn echoes into elevation. It's a place that proves buried does not mean erased, and it rewired how researchers think Antarctica grew its ice. Then there are the lakes. Whole inland seas sealed off from the sky for millions of years. Lake Vostok alone sits nearly 4,000 meters below the ice. It's oxygen-rich and pressurized, a dark ocean beneath a frozen roof. Teams finally reached it after decades of drilling, carefully engineering methods to avoid contamination while hoping for life that thrives without sunlight. Whether microbes or more complex ecosystems dominate down there, the lake's chemistry and isolation make it one of the strangest habitats on Earth. If you're looking for places where alien biology could exist on our planet, you might want to start there. The ground under ice remembers even older stories. Radio echo sounding has revealed ancient river plains and flat surfaces along East Antarctica's margin. Landscapes carved long before the ice sheet matured, then locked into stasis by the cold. These preserved surfaces run for vast distances, implying that pre-glacial drainage systems once flowed toward ancient coasts. The discovery does more than redraw hidden topography. It changes forecasts by showing which parts of the bedrock might stabilize ice flow, and which troughs might invite warm ocean waters inland. Antarctica even keeps fossilized memories of forests that flourished when continents were arranged differently and climates felt alien to us. In the Trans-Antarctic Mountains, researchers found Permian-age tree remains, evidence of dense, high-latitude forests that endured months of darkness and months of light. Those stumps and leaf impressions are not just curiosities. They're climate time capsules that record how ecosystems cope with extremes and how quickly they vanish during cataclysmic transitions. To walk among those petrified trunks is to realize that ice is a temporary steward for something far older than the human story. The white veil that preserves green ghosts. So, the hidden part is not a stretch. Antarctica conceals mountains, rivers, lakes, forests. The leap happens when people swap natural for architectural, when ridges become walls and mountains become pyramids. But before we even weigh the wilder claims, notice how the real discoveries sound like science fiction. A buried Alps, a sealed ocean, a saved coastline, a petrified woodland. These do not need embellishment to sound astonishing. The continent makes skeptics and believers feel the same thing, all that teeters on the edge of dread. The modern mythology starts with two names: a pre-war German expedition and a post-war American armada. In 1938 and 1939, Germany sent the ship Schwabenland to survey a slice of Queen Maud land, flying Dornier seaplanes and plotting swaths of coastland for potential claims. They photographed hundreds of thousands of square kilometers and dropped aluminum markers, stamping a name, New Swabia, on a map that would soon be overtaken by war and geopolitics. The facts are impressive and mundane all at once. A survey, a set of flights, and an unrealized claim that later spawned endless stories of hidden bases under the ice. The photographs exist, the fortresses do not. A few years later, the United States led Task Force 68, Operation High Jump, into the Southern Ocean with 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and roughly 4,700 personnel. The stated goals were to establish a research base, stress test polar logistics at fleet scale, and map coastlines and ice from the air, which they did in a single brutal season. The sheer size of the mission, plus its timing immediately after a global war, made it fertile grounds for rumors that something else was going on. Yet the surviving reports read like you'd expect from naval engineers and cold weather specialists: equipment trials, aerial photography, survival, and science, later bound into documents that are now public. Sometimes classified just means filed like everything else in 1947. Then the rules changed the story again. In 1959, a dozen nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, freezing territorial claims, demilitarizing the continent, and opening it up to scientific cooperation. That framework created layers of protected zones, managed areas, and environmental controls that govern where people can go and what they can do. To outsiders, that web of rules can feel like a velvet rope in front of a secret. But on the ground, it mostly looks like surveyed boundaries, wildlife buffers, and flight plans designed around safety and impact. Antarctica isn't a no-fly zone. It's a place where flying is possible, risky, and regulated for reasons that have nothing to do with buried cities. Bureaucracy makes better myths than people do. Secrecy thrives where logistics are hard and attention is sparse. Antarctica field seasons are short, aircraft range is precious, and whiteouts turn plans into prayers. So researchers push data through pipelines that aren't built for romance. Raw radar lines are cleaned, maps are gridded, and results are embargoed until peer review finishes. To a watcher on the outside, that looks like files going in and silence coming out, which is the exact silhouette of a cover-up. Still, history leaves just enough dark corners for tall tales to nest. War-era reconnaissance, big naval task forces, closed-door briefings, and controlled air corridors stack up into an atmosphere where any gap can be filled by imagination. If you want to believe that something artificial lurks beneath the ice, the scaffolding is already built. All it needs is an image that looks like geometry and a rumor that it went missing. Here's where the internet gets loud. Images of triangular peaks poking through the ice, cropped tight and labeled pyramid. The shapes are crisp, the face is flat, and the human brain, always hunting for pattern, does the rest. Geologists point out that these are nunateks, rocky summits scoured by wind, and freeze-thaw cycles into forms that can look eerily architectural from certain angles. The famous example in the Ellsworth Mountains, I don't know if I said that, Ellsworth Mountains has 4 striking faces. Sorry guys. But it's a natural peak in a range more than 400 kilometers long. The symmetry is coincidence. The material is rock. The story seems to be geology, not masonry. Pyramids make great thumbnails because they compress wonder into a single frame. But widen the frame and you'll see the context that ruins the magic. Bedding planes, joint sets, and ridge lines that read like the grammar of a mountain building. Erosion doesn't just round things off. Under certain conditions, it sharpens them into facets, especially where frost wedging and combative winds tune rock into planes. The same processes carve peaks into pyramid-looking structures into the mountains. Antarctica is not exempt from basic physics just because it's hard to visit. You'll also hear that aircraft can't fly over Antarctica, or that the continent is ringed with off-limit zones to hide whatever they found. The reality is both more boring and more believable. Flights absolutely operate there. Science traverses, supply runs, and survey missions, within a framework that accounts for weather, rescue range, wildlife protection, and international agreements. There are protected areas with special permits and managed sites with rules, which is what you design for the most fragile place on Earth. One can say the map of restrictions looks like stewardship, not censorship. Listen, the emptiness of Antarctica itself is pretty much the barrier. Another favorite claim of people's involves sealed or vanished files, usually tied to debriefs from large expeditions. Mid-century military operations produced paper floods, and those reports often lived in archives that only recently became digitized. When you look them up today, you find dry volumes full of survival tables, equipment failures, and aerial photo logs. Hardly the stuff of city under the ice revelations. The gap between rumor and record is wide, but the records do exist. And they tell a story of logistics, not labyrinths. If something monumental had been photographed at scale, the cartographic echoes would be impossible to hide for long. And yet the seduction persists, because Antarctica gives us so many true unknowns that a man-made mystery feels like the natural next step. Radar traces sketch corridors that look like roads. Lakeshores resemble harbors on first pass. Fold patterns map as grids to untrained eyes. This is where careful methods matter. Independent lines of evidence, repeat passes, and teams who argue each other down until what's left stands. The continent has taught humility to anyone who thought a single pretty image could settle a vast question. It takes 1,000 miles of data to erase one impressive screenshot. And now that we got the skepticism out of the way, and what we might think is real of Antarctica, let's get into a first-hand account of a mysterious expedition from the ice. In the winter of 1965, a joint expedition under the banner of Operation Deep Freeze 4 set out from McMurdo Station to investigate unexplained radar anomalies near the Shackleton Range. The mission logs describe the anomalies as reflective surfaces inconsistent with known topography. And at first, no one thought much of it. Antarctica has a way of confusing instruments. Radar interference, polar magnetic drift, even temperature gradients bending radar waves. But when the blips began to move, slowly and deliberately, the team began to follow. They took 2 snowcats, 6 men, and a cargo sled full of magnetometers, hoping to capture whatever caused the readings. For days, their reports stayed routine. Whiteouts, broken axles, and the endless monotony of ice. Then, 300 miles from base, transmissions began cutting in and out. The last clear radio call was from their field commander, Dr. Alan Kurtz.
"We have visual. It's under the ridge. Metallic."
The signal dissolved into static. A storm rolled in within the hour, sealing the route in 20-foot drifts. It would be 9 days before a rescue flight could even attempt to try to get them. When the weather finally cleared, an aerial team spotted the camp, or what was left of it. The snowcats were buried in a semicircle, their hatches open, headlights still faintly glowing through the snow like frozen eyes. No sign of the men though. In the middle of their encampment was a shallow depression the size of a football field. Its edges glassed and blackened as though the ice had been flash melted. Instruments recorded elevated radiation and magnetic interference strong enough to knock out compasses for miles. Photographs were taken, samples collected, and then, quietly, the site was classified. Weeks later, when the recovery film was developed, technicians reported something odd. Several frames showed a reflective shape hovering over the horizon line. Not a lens flare, not dust, but a disc-like object captured at multiple angles. One technician, in a handwritten note later found in an archive box, whether it was an optical illusion or something else entirely, no official analysis was ever released. The men of Operation Deep Freeze 4 were declared lost to exposure, and their equipment was sealed away in a US Navy warehouse. Every few years though, satellite surveys of the Shackleton Range pick up faint thermal signatures in the same coordinates, too regular to be geologic, too isolated to be campfires. Some believe it's just heat leaking from a buried glacier cavity. Others whispered still there, whatever Kurtz saw before the storm took him, preserved beneath ice, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat in the cold. Over the decades, fragments of such data have appeared in public papers. Small anomalies, unexplained gradients, patches of ground that emit faint microwaves in the dead of winter. Each time though, scientists file it away under unresolved atmospheric distortion. But patterns have a habit of surviving reclassification. Meanwhile, the real science of Antarctica grows stranger on its own. Researchers have recorded neutrinos, ghost particles rising up through the ice instead of falling down from space. Something no current model can explain. Air bursts of unexplained energy flicker beneath the polar plateau, strong enough to light up instruments from orbit. Each discovery pushes the line between physics and folklore just a little bit further, until both begin to blur into each other. The allure of a crashed craft, a hidden base, or even a buried machine endures because it speaks to a deeper craving. The need that we're not the first intellectual being on this planet. And I don't know about you guys, but I firmly believe that there's something down there. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode. I really appreciate it. Drop a like down below and subscribe for more content, and comment down below a topic that you'd like me to get into. I'm always searching for new things to research and to talk about, so let me know. And anyways guys, stay curious.